How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Ayin Aleph, Daf 71 of Masechta Chullin. Friends, Daf 71 is awesome, but it's also really cool because now we're halfway through Masechta Chullin. Masechta Chullin is 142 dafs. It's a lot of dafs. We're at 71. If my math serves me correct, that's 50%. So that's pretty exciting. Now today's daf is, I'd say, interesting, but in a Gemara kind of interesting. Anyways, the first section we learn about different things. Oh yeah, learning out different things about different animals. I don't know how to better explain it than that. Sheesh, we're going to be talking about Chaya Tameya, Chaya Tameya, sure, Chaya Tahora, Behema Tameya, Behema Tahora, and yeah. That we're learning out different stuff about all those things in different ways. Anyways, that's the first section. And then we get to a new Mishnah, which talks about, what does it talk about? It talks about a woman who loses her fetus, unfortunately. Right, so a woman who the fetus dies, and essentially there's Tumah inside of her, right? Because a dead fetus is going to be mitame, a corpse Tumah sames. So there is essentially Tumah Sames inside of her. So what happens? And that is going to lead to an interesting topic called Tumah Blua, swallowed up Tumah. Essentially, here you have an example of Tumah, this Tumah Sames, this corpse, this fetus that is swallowed up inside of this woman, and it's a difficult topic. It's Tumah and Tara. It's also gets into Tumah Sa'oel, which Tumah Sa'oel is like a tricky type of Tumah, which I don't know quite enough about yet. I'm learning right now Masechta Kelim in Mishnayos, which is a mighty Masechta. You haven't heard me say so much about Masechta, about my Mishnayos that I'm learning recently, because honestly, I don't really have so much to report. It's 30 prakim. A lot of it is just like lists of vessels. It's very, very dry. But anyways, after Masechta Kelim is Masechta Oyalos. And in Masechta Oyalos, we learn about all the halacha, the intricate halachas of Tumah Sa'oil. So I'm not an expert yet, so I'm going to bring forth my current state of knowledge to these sugyas. So anyways, these are, so there are interesting, Tumah Blue is an interesting topic, and it gets into Tumah Sa'oil a little bit. The second part is very Tumah-y, but that's also interesting. So, anyways, Chevra, come, let's have a great time, and let's learn Daf Ayin Aleph, Daf 71 of Masechta Chullin. Friends, we begin on Daf Ayin Amid Beis, about 2, 4, 6, I think 8 lines from the bottom of Daf Ayin Amid Beis. Tanya, we're learning at Brisa. You got me? Good. Amr B'Yonason, yeah. Namti lo ben Azai. Says Rabbi Yonason that I said to Ben Azai, wait, I need to fix my kippah. Yeah, let's get it a little bit tighter so that it stays on a little better. It doesn't feel like it's falling off. Who's Ben Azai? Ben Azai is a Tana. He's a Tana. One of the unique things about Ben Azai is he, of course, was one of the 4 who entered into the orchard. One of the Arba Shenichnasu Lepardes, along with Ben Zoma, Rabbi Akiva, and Acher. So, as we learned about Masechta Chagiga, Tanya, Amr Rabbi Yonason, Namtilo LeBen Azai. So says Rabbi Yonason, I said to Ben Azai, Lamadnu, or Lamdenu, Nivas Behema Tahora Shemtamas. What? Oh, okay. Yeah, fine. Okay. Tanya, Amr Rabbi Yonason, Ben, what? Omar, what? Tanya, Amr Rabbi Yonason, says Rabbi Yonason, Namtilo LeBen Azai. I said to Ben Azai, Lamadnu, we learned Nivlas Behema Tahora. We learned that the nevela of a behema tahora is mitame, right? What does the pasuk say? If an animal that's kosher dies, so it's tumas nevela, it's mitame. Nivlas chaya tahora. Where am I? I'm skipping. I'm all over the place. Nivlas behema tahora shemitama, v'nivlas behema tamea shemitama, and also Nivlas Chaya Tumeya. Nivlas Chaya Tumeya Shemitama. Wow, I'm like really struggling to read over here. Anyways, we learned a pasuk yesterday from Korban Olav Yored, there by Korban Olav Yord, by Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshav. I'll read you the pasuk. O nefesh asher tika b'chol tamei, o benivlas chaya tmeya, o benivlas behema tmeya. And then it says v'utame v'ashem. So what have we said? So the previous pasuk we had said v'chiyomas min habema asher yilachim la'ochla hanugeh benivlas yitmar arev. So the previous pasuk we learned about that a behema tmeya, that a behema tahora, its nevela is mitami. In this other pasuk by Korban Olav Yored, we learned that a behema tmeya and a chaya tmeya, their nevela is mitami. The only one missing is chaya tehora. So I'm going to start over again. Tanya Amrib Yonasin Namtilol ben Azai Lamadnu. We learned nivlas behema tahora shemitama v'nivlas behema tmeya. Shemitama nivlas chaya tmeya. Shemitama nivlas chaya tahora lo lamadnu. But we haven't learned about nivlas chaya tahora. We learned about nivlas behema tahora, nivlas behema tmeya, nivlas chaya tmeya. We haven't learned about nivlas chaya tahora. So nivlas chaya tahora lo lamadnu minayin. So how do we know that nivlas chaya tahora is mitami? Normally, so he said to me, Kol holich al kapav b'chol achaya ma'oleches. Well, Ben Azai quoted Rabbi Yonasan a pasuk that we learned about yesterday. The pasuk of Kol holich al kapav, anything that walks on its hands, b'chol achaya, all chayas, meaning tahor, tameh, makes no difference. So even a chaya tahor, how leches in the pasuk there says, Tmei meim lochem kol nogeh b'nivlasam yitmar ha'arev. If you touch the nevela, you're tamei. And there it said b'chol achaya. So whether it's a chaya tamei or a chaya tahora, if it's a nevela, it's going to be mitami. You're going to be tamei. So Ben Azai says that we learn from there that chaya tahoras are also mitami. So now we know that behema tahoras, chaya tahoras, behema tmeas, chaya tmeas, everything their nevela is mitami namtilo. But Rabbi Yonasan says that I replied to Ben Azai, but 1 second, Ben Azai, v'chinemar v'chol chaya v'alolo ne'emar ela bichol achaya. 1 second, it doesn't say vichol chaya, it doesn't say that all chayas are mitami nevela. It says bichol, inside, as we learned about yesterday, l'mahalche kapayim bichayahu de'asa. Right, if you remember yesterday, Rabbi Yitzchak had made a drasha from that pasuk that v'chol holech al kapav bichol achaya oleches, that it's talking about essentially the fetus of a behema tmeya that's inside of its mother. So bichaya, inside of a chaya. But it's not talking about, it's not coming to teach us about chaya tehoras, but all chayas. So normally, Ben Azai says to me, Ben Azai says to Rabbi Yonasan, Uma Yishmael Omer B'davar Hazeh. What does Rabbi Yishmael say about this? Interesting. Ben Azai wants to know what Rabbi Yishmael says on this topic. So Namtilo, so says Rabbi Yonasan, I said to Ben Azai, here's what Rabbi Yishmael says, V'chiyomus min behema, that when that first pasuk says V'chiyomus min behema, zo behema tmeya. That's behema tmeya. Asher yilachem la'ochla, zo behema Torah. And when it says that Asher yilachem la'ochla, that you can eat, that's a behema Torah. So the pasuk says, right, I'm reading that again, V'chiyomus min behema, zo behema tmeya. Asher yilachem la'ochla, zo behema Torah. So that pasuk is talking about behema tmeyas and behema Torahs, and the Gemara doesn't say this, but I'm reading you from the pasuk. It says hanogea b'nivlasa yitmar ha'arev. If you touch their nevela, if they die and you touch the nevela, you'll be tummy. So we see the pasuk there is talking about a behema tmeya and a behema tahora, and that their nevela is mitami. Now, continues the Gemara. Lamadnu chaya bichlal behema uvehema bichlal chaya. And we've learned that a chaya is a type of behema, is included in behema. We also learned, says the Gemara, that behema is included in chaya. But in terms of this, in the context of this pasuk, so we just said, this pasuk says, V'chiyamus min ha-behema asher lochem lo-ochla. So chiyamus min ha-behema is talking about a behema tameya. Asher lochem lo-ochla is talking about a behema tahora. So behema tameya, behema tahora, and it says if they're nevela, they're matame. And we're saying that chaya is included in behema, as we're going to learn about in just a few minutes. Chaya is included in behema. So memele, if chaya is included in behema, so when it says behema tameya, it also includes chaya tameya. When it says behema tahora, it also includes chaya tahora. And it was saying that the nevela is tame, so and is mitame. So we see that both behema, that essentially behema tameya as well as chaya tameya, behema tahora as well as chaya tahora are all mitame. They're all mitame with tumas nevela. So again, lemanu chaya bichlal behema, behema bichlal chaya. Chaya tahora, therefore, bichlal behema tahora. Chaya tameya bichlal behema tameya. And continues the Gemara, behema tameya bichlal chaya tameya, behema tahora bichlal chaya tahora. We said that behemas are included in chayas, chayas are included in behemas, and behema Torah is included in Chaya Torah is included in Behema Torah, Behema Tmei is included in Chaya Tmei is included in Behema Tmei, everything's included in everything else. The Gemara is going to explain, okay, fine, that sounds all great and confusing and everything, but what's the nafkamina? What do we learn out from all these things being included in each other? Hisyatzvu ru'u. Come, join me, and let's see. Chevra, I do want to point out, Chevra, something that I had in mind that I want to share. I think I wanted to say it at the beginning. I don't think I did say it. If you have any questions, if ever anybody has any questions, I'm available. Just want to make sure it's, over time. I feel like maybe I this need to be mechazik. The fact that if anybody has any questions, I'm available. Feel free to ask. I'm here to help. So yeah, this stuff is not the easiest. So just if anybody has any questions and maybe you weren't sure, I'm giving you the chizik. I'm available and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has. Just write it in WhatsApp and I am available. Okay, now, so as you could tell, you could rely on me. So where am I? Chaya Tmea Behema. I don't even know where I am anymore. I know where I am. I just don't know how to read it. Behema Tmea Bechlal Chaya Tmea. Okay, fine. Behema Torah Bechlal Chaya Torah. Okay, great. Now. So where are we at? So where we're at is Rabbi Yonason asks Ben Azai, how do we know that a Chaya Tmea is it's nevela? No, that a chaya tahora, like a deer, for example, its nevela is tame, is tamatumas nevela, and essentially we got into this whole thing of everything being included in everything else. Now, uveloshan hazeh omarli, and Ben Azai, and Rabbi Yonason is reporting that Ben Azai in the following words said to me, Chaval al Ben Azai shaloshimesh is Rabbi Shmuel. When Ben Azai responded to Rabbi Yonason and said, did Rabbi Shmuel say anything about this? And Rabbi Yonason said yes, in fact, and he gave this whole elaborate thing about behema tameya, behema tahora, and how the chayas are included in the behemas, and this, and vice versa, and everything. Ben Azai says, wow, Chaval, I didn't spend more time with Rabbi Shmuel. Now, as we had just said, I'm going to read this again, even though it's confusing, but just one last time. We had said, Chaya Tahora b'chlal behema Tahora, Chaya Tmeya b'chlal behema Tmeya, behema Tmeya b'chlal Chaya Tmeya, behema Tahora b'chlal Chaya Tahora. We're now going to go through each one of those four things of this included in that and explain what we learned from it. Starting with Chaya. So first of all, we have to establish the fact that Chaya is b'chlal behema. I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm all over the place. I don't know why I'm all over the place. I shouldn't be all over the place, but I am. So chaya b'chlal behema min. How do we know that a chaya is included in a behema, right? Because we had said before, chayas are included in behemas are included in chayas. So first, and this is important, right? This is important for because the whole thing is learned out from the fact that we have a pasuk that says behema tamea. Essentially, we learn out from it behema tamea and behema tahora, and then that relied upon the fact that chaya is included in behema. So therefore, Mameli also have chaya tamea and chaya tahora, and it says that it's nevela is tameh, and then we got into the whole thing of everything's included in everything. So we're setting up the stage. So starting with how do we know that chayas are included in behemas, so that when the pasuk says chaya tamea and chaya tahora, it also includes. No, I'm sorry. When the pasuk says, I guess this is a little bit confusing. Anyways, when the pasuk says behema tamea and behema tahora, it also includes chaya tamea and chaya tahora. This is how we know that chaya is bechlal behema minolin tichsib zos behema asher tochelu. This is the behema that you can eat. Shor seksavim v'chulei. So the pasuk says, okay, oxen, sheep, goats. Okay, those are all behemas. But then the pasuk says, ayol v'tzvi v'yachmar. A deer and a tzvi. What's a tzvi? I don't remember now. I always thought a tzvi was a deer, but they defined tzvi as something else. I don't have it here. Oh man, gazelle. I think it was a gazelle. I think that they defined tzvi as a gazelle, and ayal I think is a deer. They said deer, and that was the JPS. I think ayal is a deer, and I also looked it up like in Hebrew. Apparently, a tzvi is a gazelle. Apparently, and an ayal is a deer. Okay, and a yachmor. What's a yachmor? I don't remember that one. Was that an ibex? No, I don't think it was an ibex. Some other chaya. So let's see, maybe I could look it up real quick. But this is the article. I didn't look at what the article says about it. Let's see, how do they define these things? They define these things as a hart, a deer. Oh, so they do define spheres and a yachmer. Oh, they don't even define yachmer. Akopanim, there are different types of chayas. Okay, so chayv chavehema minolin tichsiv zosa behema asher tochelu. These are the behemas that you can eat. Sure, so mentions ox, sheep, goat, fine, those are behemoths, but then ayol tzvi v'yachmer, those are chayas. So we're saying these are the behemoths you can eat, and we start listing chayas. So clearly, how could this be chaya b'chlal behema? Rather, what you see is chayas are actually included in behema, and if we're talking about behemoths, we're also talking about chayas, and therefore, when we're talking about behema tamea and behema tahora being having metame with tumas nevela, it also includes chaya tamea and chaya tahora. Behema b'chal chaya minolin, and we had also said that behemas are included in chayas. That when it says chayas, it includes behemas. How do we know this? The pasuk says, "Zos achaya shetochlu mikola behema asher al It says mikola chaya. Zos achaya shetochlu. These are the chayas, and then what does it say? Mikola behema. These are the chayas, all of the behemas. Asher al common phrases, paisa, etc. What's going on here? Behema b'chlal chaya. So clearly, behema is included in chaya. Okay, so we have just established that concept that this kind of is hinged on, which is that behema includes chaya and that chaya includes behema. Now, to go on to those other things about how behema tamea is included in chaya tamea is included in behema tamea, all that stuff. So beginning with chaya tahora bichlal behema tahora, that a tahor, a kosher chaya, is included in a kosher behema. What does that teach? Lisimanim, for the simani kashrus, chewing cud and split hooves. So just like those are the simanim for a behema, the same applies to chayas, chewing cud and split hooves. Chaya tamea b'chlal behema tamea, and when we say that a chaya tamea is included in a behema tamea, that's to say leharvoya. The pasuk says behem tucholo sabir kilayim, that a behema you can't have like I don't know, I guess probably a sheep and a goat. You probably shouldn't mate together. So that would be kilayim, and it says behem tucholo sabir kilayim. How do you know it applies also to like donkeys and I don't know, something else, a yachmor? Oh no, yachmor is kosher. I don't know. That kilayim also applies to non-kosher animals. I guess a mule. I imagine you probably can't make a mule, right? That's a horse and a donkey. Classic example. So how do we know that applies to chayas as well? So because chayas are included in behemoth, so when it says behem tcholos tabia klaim, it also applies to chayas. And this, by the way, also would apply to kosher animals, right? So tzvis and yachmors or whatever. Right? The Gemara is now giving one example per scenario, but they could be applied in other cases as well. So obviously the simane kashrus wouldn't be applied to non-kosher animals, but something like not mixed breeding, so that would apply to kosher animals as well. Behema tmeya bichlal chaya tmeya, and when we say that a behema tmeya is included in a chaya tmeya, lichdi Rebbe, this is for Rebbe. If you remember yesterday, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak had made a drasha from the pasuk by Korban Ola v'Yored, that it said by Korban Ola v'Yored, the pasuk had said, "O nefesh asher tiga b'chol davar tamei, o b'nivlas chaya tamei, o b'nivlas behema tamei," and we asked, what about the nevela of a behema tahora? After all, the nevela of a behema tahora is tamei. Why isn't it mentioned by Korban Ola v'Yored? Rather, so Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, clearly this is talking about the fetus. We're talking about fetuses that only the fetuses of behema tameas are tamei, but behema tahoras are tahor. So that was Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak's explanation for B'yosei Glili Shita yesterday. Now there was a suggestion in the Gemara that maybe this pasuk is needed exclusively for Rebbe's shita, and this is Rebbe's shita. So the Tanya that we're learning in the Brisa, Rebbe Omer Ekra Ani Chaya Behema Lama Nemra. Right, that again, I'm reading that pasuk again by Korban Ola v'Yored. It says, "Chodover o benivlas chaya tmeya o benivlas behema tmeya." That the pasuk by Korban Ola v'Yored says that if you touch the nevela of a chaya tmeya, or if you touch the nevela of a behema tmeya. But we just said that behemas are included in chayas. So really, it just needs to say if you touch the nevela of a chaya tmeya. And that would also include a behema tameya. So why then specify as well behema tameya? Seems extra. So it says, Rebbe, it is extra. Behema lama nemra. Why do we have behema then? Nemra kan behema tameya, because it says by Korban Ola v'Yored behema tameya. V'nemra lahala behema tameya. Also in the context of somebody who's tamei and eats a korban shlomim, who eats kachim, right? The pasuk says, v'nefesh kisiga b'chol tamei. B'tumas adam, or behema tmeya, or b'chol sheketz tamei, v'achim b'sazevach hashlamim, and yuchayiv kares. So the pasuk says behema tmeya by eating kachim, and therefore we learn out malahalan tumas kodesh, afkan tumas kodesh. Of course, when it comes to korban ola v'yored, if you remember from Masechta Shavuos, yuchayiv a korban ola v'yored for tumas mikdash v'kodashav. If a person, for example, touches the nevela of touches nevela, and now he's tamei, and he eats a korban, like we learned from that other pasuk, or he goes into the Beis Hamikdash. So if you look at the pasuk by Korban Ola v'Yored, it doesn't say anything about going into the Beis Hamikdash or eating kachim. It doesn't. Again, let's look at that pasuk again. O nefesh shetiga b'chol davar tamei, somebody who touches something tamei. O benivlas chaya tmeya, or touches a nevela, o benivlas behema tmeya, o benivlas sheretz, touches all sorts of nevelas, tamei, so he's tamei, v'nela mimenu, v'u tamei v'ashen. So if I just look at that pasuk, maybe what it means is somebody who touches nevela needs to bring a korban ola v'yored. It doesn't say anything about tumas mikdash v'kedash. It doesn't say anything about and he goes into the Beis Hamikdash. It doesn't say that. So how do we know that it is talking about Tumas Mikdash v'Kedashim? That it's talking about somebody who's tamei, who then ate kachim, or by accident, or went into the Beis Hamikdash by accident. He brings a korban ola v'yored. So we learn that out from the Gzeira Shava, that behema tameya in that pasuk is extra, and it says behema tameya by when you eat kachim when you are tamei. So that means that korban ola v'yored is specifically by Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashim. So now, Geval dig. Okay, so that's what we learn. So we had said that behema tameya is included in chaya tameya, and that's what allows us to make this gzeira shava. Because since it already says chaya, the nevela of a chaya tameya, and that includes therefore the behema, the nevela of a behema tameya. So why does it say behema tameya in order to learn that we're talking about tumas mikdash v'kedashim by gzeira shava? Behema Torah, Bichlal Chaya Torah, and finally, a Behema Torah is included in a Chaya Torah, Liyitzira, for creation. That the Gemara doesn't say this, but the Pasuk says in Parshas Bereishis, Vayitzer, Yitzira, he created. Hashem Elokim min Adama kol achaya kol chaya sasadeh. Chayas. It says Yitzira by chayas. But because animals, behemoths, are included in chayas, so therefore it says Yitzira effectively by chayas as well. What's the nafkamina? This now we learn in the Mishnah Masechta Nida. Hamapeles min behema chayav va'of. If a woman miscarriages, and we look at at what emerged, and it looks like a behema, or a chaya, or an oaf. Bein tmein bein torin, whether the animal that it looks like is a kosher animal or not. Im zocher, if what emerged from this woman is what looks like a male animal, teshiv lizocher, so then she will be tamei for 7 days and tahor and have the yemei taira of 33 days. Im nikeva teshiv nikeva. If whatever animal this was female, so whatever animal this looked like was a female animal, so then 14 days of tumah, 66 days of taira. Eino yodua, and if it's non-discernible, teshiv l'zachar v'la nekeva divrei Meir. So then you apply the stringencies of zachar and nekeva. What does that mean? It means that should be tamei for 14 days, like a nekeva. However, the yemei taira, basically the way it works is that let's say a woman gives birth to a girl. So as the beginning of Parshas Tazria, the Psukim the Torah explains that if a woman gives birth to a girl, for example, after she gives birth, she's Tumah, she essentially has Tumas Nida for 14 days, after which, for the next 66 days, she is these are Yemei Tahara, which means any dam that she sees during that next 66 days, she's tahor. She's tahor during that period, right? So if it's a boy, she has 7 days where she's tameya, and for the next 33 days, any dam she sees is not dam nida. It's tahor blood. And if for a girl, it's 14 days of tumah initially, and then the next 66 days, any dam is tahor. She would not be a nida. So if this whatever emerged from her when she miscarried, the gender was undiscernible, so then you have to apply the chumras of both. 14 days of tumah, but only a total of 40 days, right? The period of Yemei Tahara ends after 40 days from the birth. So basically 14 days of tumah, and then 26 days of Tahara. Okay, fine. That's the opinion of Reb Meir. Mitzuras Adam Eino Valad. Whereas the Chacham say, look, if what emerges does not look like a human, well then it's not considered a Valad, a baby, and there would be no Yemei Tumah, Yemei Tahara, right? This wouldn't apply. That would only apply to humans. Now, in order for us to be able to say that there is this Tumah, right? We saw the opinion of Reb Meir that hamapeles behema chayav va'of. If it looks like a boy, then there's the tumah and tire of a boy. If it's a girl, then a girl, etc. So that's because there's yitziras valad. There's yitzira by a behema and a chaya. How do we know this? Because it says the pasuk in Bereishis says vayitzer Hashem Elokim, and it says it's called chaya, and behema is included in chaya. Satzim by chayas and behemas, there's yitzira, and that if a woman miscarries and it looks like a chaya or behema, it would nonetheless there would be the tumas yoledis. Now, givaldik. So we're essentially done with that section. This was a little bit of a mission. I feel like it was no, I don't feel like anything. It was a little bit of a, not like hard or confusing or anything, but it was like a little bit awkward. I don't know. There was something awkward about it. It was very choppy. This tumah, that tumah, that tumah, this tumah, coming from here, coming from there, in this way, flip it around that way. But it wasn't like that hard, but it was like, I don't know, it's hard to get in a flow maybe. I don't know. I feel like Al kol panim, we're done with that section of the Behema Torah, Behema Tmeya, this included in that, whatever. In the last line of the Gemara before the Mishnah, we go back essentially to the Mishnah that we learned yesterday. Yesterday we learned in the Mishnah that if a mother animal who is alive, has a dead fetus inside of her. So, according to Tanakama, whether we're talking about a Behema Torah or a Behema Tmeya, if the shepherd or whoever sticks their hand in and touches that dead fetus, they will remain tahor. They will be tahor. Rabbi Yosef Aglili says, well, if it's a Behema Tahora, it will be tahor. If it's a Behema Tmeya, it will be tamei. And we, Reb Nachman Bar Yitzchak yesterday, as I mentioned earlier, used the pasuk by Korban Olav Yored to say, why is it only talking about tamei animals? Why isn't it talking about the nevela of Torah animals? After all, Torah animals also have nevela, and he says because it's talking about the fetus. Only the fetus of tamei animals is tamei, but of Torah animals is Torah. So now the Gemara says, what did they do with Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak's pasuk that he's learning from? So well, we just learned that Rebbe learns from that pasuk of Gzeira Shava to teach that pasuk is talking about Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashav. So the Chacham say that's what the pasuk is talking about. It's not talking about Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak's drasha, and therefore they maintain that whether the animal is tahor, whether the animal is tamei, whether we're talking about a sheep or a donkey, it makes no difference. The fetus will not be considered nivela. Givaldig. All right, friends, and now we get up to a new Mishnah. As I mentioned in the introduction, this Mishnah talks about a woman whose fetus is no longer alive, but the Gemara really discusses the sugya of swallowed tumah blua. I think it's actually an interesting sugya, though it is a little technical, but also interesting. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, Isha shemes vlada b'soch me'el, a woman whose fetus, unfortunately, is no longer alive. Ufashta chaya es yada, and a midwife stuck her hand into the woman, v'naga bo, and touched the fetus. Hachaya tmeya tumas shiva. So the midwife is tamei tumas shiva. That's corpse shiva. That's corpse tuma, right? So essentially, you have this woman. Inside of her is a fetus that is not alive. The midwife touched the not alive fetus. The midwife is now tamei tumas hames. 7 days of tumah. The woman, however, the pregnant woman, she remains tahora ad sheyetze avalad until the fetus leaves her body, exits her body. Now, what's very interesting about this is that, so my understanding is that I think the Gemara is ultimately going to say that the midwife is only tamei midirabanan. So let's not worry so much about the midwife right now. What's interesting about the woman is that she has this nevela inside of her. Not nevela, I'm sorry. She has this fetus inside of her that is not alive. A not alive fetus, once we said that once it's born, it's going to, right, once it comes out of her, she'll be tamei with tumas hames. But so long as it's inside of her, she's tahor. So now, so as long as it's inside of her, she's tahor, which is interesting. So you have this fetus, which is going to be metame tumas hames. Right? This fetus is metame tumas hames, but it's inside of this woman now, and even though inside of her there's tumas hames, but she remains tahor. Okay. So now, says the Gemara, Rabba says, Rabba, Kishim Shetuma Blua Eina Mitama, Kach Taira Blua Eina Mitama. Wow. So it says Rabba, just like Tuma Blua. So what we just described now in the Mishnah is this woman who essentially has Tumas Hames inside of her, and yet she remains Tahor. because it's swallowed up Tumah. This is Tumah Blua, this mace, essentially, that's inside of her, is swallowed up inside of her, therefore it does not make her tummy. And says Rabbah, just like swallowed up Tumah is not mitame, again, well, I think we're going to have to deal with the fact that why is it mitame, if it's swallowed up Tumah, why is it mitame the midwife who reaches her end? And let's not worry about the midwife right now. We're focused on the woman who right, that the fetus is inside of her. So says Rabbah, just like this swallowed up Tumah, which is this dead fetus inside of her, is not mitame her, so also swallowed up Tahara does not become Tameh. What does that mean? It means, for example, Rashi says, if somebody swallows a ring, a metal ring, and goes into a house in which there is a corpse or a tent. Let's use a tent, nice and simple. Ohel, a tent. So there's a tent in which there is a corpse, which means that everything in that tent is tameh, and a person who goes into that tent becomes tameh. Now, if a person swallows a ring, and inside of them now is a ring, and they walk into a tent in which there is a corpse, and they become tameh, the ring remains tahor. So Rabbah says, just like swallowed tumah, that there's tumah inside one's body, that tumah is not mitame, does not make the person tameh, as we saw, for the example, when there's a fetus inside of a woman. We're going to see another example. The woman remains tahor so long as the fetus is inside of her. So just like swallowed tumah is not mitame, so swallowed tahara, when something swallowed inside of you is tahor, and then you go into a ohel ames and you become tameh, what's swallowed inside of you remains tahor. As I said, I think it's an interesting concept over here, but we're gonna have to talk things out. So Rabbah says, Rabbah again, Kshem Shet, Tumah blua eina mitama, just like swallowed Tumah is not mitame, kach tahara blua, swallowed tahara eino mitama, does not become tameh. Tumah blua minol, and how do we know that swallowed Tumah is not mitame? The Pasuk says, Va'ocha minivlasa yichabes begadab. Interesting. Milo askinon da'achol samuch l'shkias acham v'komer rachmana tahor. Very interesting question. A person eats nevela, and they become tameh. What does it say? It says, Va'ocha minivlasa yichabes begadab. Person who eats nevela needs to wash their clothing. In what scenario would a person who eats nevela need to wash their clothing? So one way to understand it is that they're talking about nivlas of tahor. That a person who eats, right, nivlas of tahor, a dead chicken. Right, I went to a chicken shchita the other week, and one of the chickens was a nevela. It's a nivlas of tahor. It's not mitame b'maga b'masa. But if you eat it, it's mitame begadim bebeis habliya. Mitame begadim bebeis habliya. When you swallow it, when you eat it, it'll make your clothing tameh. So one option is that it's talking about nivlas of tahor. You swallow it, you make it tahor, and you become tameh. Your clothing becomes tameh. The Ramban al Chumash, Ramban al Torah, he says it could just be talking about if you just eat any nevela. I don't know, you eat a sheep that dropped dead, you eat a kazais of its meat. So you touch it, so you become tameh, and then when you pick it up to put it in your mouth, it's tumas masa as well. So your clothing becomes tameh. So, anyways, so let's say you ate a piece. Let's say you ate a lamb chop, and it was nevela. You ate a lamb chop of nevela. So we say that you are tameh, your clothing is tameh. So what do? You go to the mikveh. Right, Tumas nevela, it's an avatumah, you become rishon, you go to the mikveh, and you wait until the evening. Comes the evening, and you're tahor, right? You went to the mikveh during the day, you were teful yom for a bit, comes the evening, and you are now tahor. But the Gemara says something really interesting. What if you ate that lamb chop late in the afternoon? Towards the end of the day? and you realize that you just ate nevela, and that you picked it up and you ate it, and you tame tumas masa, and your tame, your clothing's tame. So you quickly run to the mikvah before the end of the day. You jump in the mikvah, and the pasuk says, what does the pasuk say after that? No, can I find the pasuk? Which pasuk is it? Pasuk K. Okay, you tame until the evening. You told me till the evening. No. What? So what's interesting about this? What's interesting about this is that you ate this lamb chop late in the afternoon. You quickly went to the mikvah. Comes the evening, we're saying you're tahor. There's no distinction in the pasuk about when you ate this lamb chop. You're still digesting that lamb chop. That lamb chop is nevela. It's inside of you. Sure, you went to the mikvah. Sure, it's nightfall. But shouldn't you become recontaminated? Inside of you, there's nevela. You just ate it a few minutes ago. You quickly jumped to the mikvah. Now it's nighttime. You're tahor. But shouldn't the nevela that's inside of you now be mitame you? We say no. So we say that's a raya that swallowed tumah is not mitame. Because if it was, you would just become recontaminated by the tumah that's inside of you. Right, so tumah blua minolan dichsiva ochel minivlasa. Somebody who eats nevela, yichab is begadav. So you just jump in the mikvah and you wash yourself, your clothing, and then at nighttime you are tahor. But milo askinon the ochal samuch lishkias achama. Is it not talking about even if you ate just a few minutes before sunset? The ka'amar achmana tahor, and we're saying just jump in the mikvah and then comes sunset and you are tahor. What about the fact that you have nevela inside of you? So rather we see that swallowed tumah is not mitame. To which the Gemara says, well, one second. The assumption here is that swallowed nevela is still nevela. Is that true? Is swallowed nevela in fact still nevela? If you have a lamb, or for example, when I went to chicken shechita the other day, so there was nothing wrong with the chicken. Right? It's just during the shechita, it was a partial shechita, so it's nevela. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with that shechita. It wasn't with that with that chicken or anything. So you can give it, right? The pasuk says, right? Lager sheb, was it lager sheb sharecha tidnena v'achala o machol nachri, right? Lager sheb sharecha tidnena v'achala o machol nachri. Is that? Oh, here it is. Lo soch l'kol nevela lager sheb sharecha tidnena v'achala o machol nachri. So you can give it to a ger. That's right. It's a ger toshav. Obviously, it's not talking about a Jewish ger. So I'm about a ger toshav, somebody who's not Jewish, but they keep the Shev mitzvahs b'nei noach, but they eat treifas, nevelas. So what are we saying? So why are we we're assuming that once you take a lamb chop and you eat it and you chew it and it's now digesting in your stomach, that it's still nevela. The pasuk says that what do you do with nevela? You give it to a ger toshav. A ger toshav doesn't want to eat your already swallowed and digesting food. They want to eat meat. You give them meat, they'll eat it. They're not going to eat your food that's already been eaten. So maybe in order for it to be considered nevela that's tameh, it has to be in a state that you would give it to a ger toshav. Not maybe once you've eaten it, it's no longer nevela that's going to be matame the person bichlal. So there's really nothing to talk about. We're saying, this is a proof that this is that tumah blua is not matame. There's no what tumah. This isn't nevela anymore. You already ate it. So v'dilma shiny awesome. Maybe this is different in this scenario where you ate this nevela dilo chazi leger, because it's no longer in a state that which the pasuk is describing when it says you could take this nevela and give it to a ger toshav. So anicha l'Rabbi Yochanan the Amar achazoi v'achazo ad lekelev shapir. Well, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it doesn't make a difference. According to Rabbi Yochanan, even once you've swallowed, even once you've chewed up this lamb chop and swallowed it, it's still nevela. And it's still going to be metame the person who ate it. Well, it's still going to be considered nevela. The question is it metame or not? But it's still considered nevela. Right? I'm reading that again. That says, Rabbi Yochanan, whether in regard to being metame adam or to be metame ochel umashkin, it doesn't matter. Ad lekeleb, so long as even a dog would still be willing to eat it. And I guess the assumption is that in this case, when you've eaten it and it's inside of you, I guess potentially a dog would still be willing to eat it in that state. Anyways, shapir. So it's still going to be considered nevela and would still be metame a person. And therefore, so then why is this nevela that's in this person's body who ate it not being metame him? It must be a raya that Tumah blua is not metame. El levar pada, what about according to bar pada? Because according to bar pada, once you eat it, and once you can no longer give it to a ger toshav doesn't want your lamb chop that you've already eaten and swallowed and are digesting. Once you can no longer give it to a ger toshav, it's no longer metame adam. So according to bar pada, the reason why the person remains tahor at nightfall is because whatever's inside of him is no longer able to be metame, regardless of tumah blua. So Levar Pada the Amar who says Tumah Chamura Lager, that the criteria for defining Tumah Chamura is an Ava Tumah. That Nevela is only an Ava Tumah so long as you could still give it to Ger Toshav to eat. V'Tumah Kala Ad Lekeleb. And if it's in a state where you can't give this to Ger Toshav, you won't accept it, such as if you ate it. But technically in that state a dog could still be willing to eat it. So that would still be Matame Ochlin Umashkin. If it's in that state, that you can't give it to a ger toshav in that state, but you can give it to a dog. So that would be matame like a vlada tumah, like a rishon tumah, that can be matame ochlin umashkin, but it won't be able to be matame adam. So according to that, right, v'tumah kala ad lekelef mishum t'lochazi leger, who, because it's not fit for a ger. Right? Did I read that correctly? By part of the Omer, tumah chamur leger, v'tumah kala ad lekelef mishum t'lochazi legeru. So mishum d'uchazi leger. So the reason why the tumah that this nevela that's already been eaten, we're saying he goes to the mikvah and he's tahor. Well, isn't the nevela that's inside of him going to be metameim? According to Bar Pada, no, it won't, because it's not in a state that you can give it to a ger. In this case, it will only be metame ochlin umashkin. It can't be metame adam anymore. So it's no raya. It's nothing to do with tumah blue. It has to do with the fact that this nevela is no longer able to be metame a person. So says the Gemara, a very interesting answer. Interesting. We'll take a shluck of tea and we'll explain this concept. Which is, what a person doesn't see doesn't bother them. Clearly, if you ate this lamb chop and vomited it up in front of the ger toshav, he will say, no thank you, I don't like to eat vomited up for regurgitated food. I'm not a, what was that bird that we mentioned the other day? That nasty bird? The pelican. The ger toshav says, no thank you, I'm not a pelican. But, what if a person cut up a nice, beautiful looking piece of lamb chop, of nevela lamb chop, and didn't chew it at all, swallowed it, excused himself, went to the other room, regurgitated it, washed it off in the sink, maybe made it look presentable, and gave it to the ger toshav? He wouldn't know the difference. The point being that technically speaking, you could have a scenario where a person could swallow nevela and it could still be in a state, I mean, this is very technical, but theoretically, you could cut up a piece of this lamb chop swallow it whole, and it could still be in a piece that theoretically you could regurgitate it, clean it off, and make sure the ger doesn't know that you did this, and say, hey, look, here's a delicious piece of meat, and he would accept it. So theoretically, you could have a scenario where you swallow nevela, and it's inside of you, and it's still in a state that you would be able to give it to a ger, and still we're saying, even then it would not be metame the person, because Tumah Blua is not metame. It's not going to make the person tame, and that would be even Bar Pada would say in that case that yes, I admit that the meat is in a state that you could give it to a ger, and still it is not going to be metame the person because Tumah Blua is not metame. Okay, give valdig. So we have just learned from this raya from nevela that a person who eats nevela, even if they eat it right at the end of the day and quickly jump in the mikvah, comes nightfall and they are tahor. Comes the evening and they are tahor, even though there's still nevela inside of them, they don't become tameh because Tumah Blua is not mitame, it won't make them tameh. Very, very interesting, very, very interesting concept. So now, Ashkechan Tumah Blua, Tyra Blua Minolan. Okay, so we just learned about Tumah Blua. That when you have tumah inside of you, it doesn't make you tameh. What about the other case that we said? Rabbi had said just like Tumah Blua is not mitame, Tyra Blua does not become tameh. So a person swallows a ring that's tahor and walks into an oil amaze, they become tameh, but the ring remains tahor. How do we know that? Kal v'chomer. From a kal v'chomer. Uma klei cheres hamukif tzomid posil sheino matzil al tumah shebesoichoy min tamid omer mar tumah ritzutza bekazvo la'ad l'rakia matzil al taira shebesoichoy militame odem shematzil al tumah shebesoichoy militame eino din shematzil al taira shebesoichoy militame. Bum 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 badam badam. When it comes to klei cheres and when it comes to oil amaze, so as I said earlier, I'm learning Masechta Kelim and Mishnayos. Very difficult. Masechta is just very, 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 very dry. However, in Masechta Kelim, when it comes to Klei Cheres, there are some halachas of Tumas oil that come up. Particularly in this context. A context like we are describing here. That you have an oil amaze. You have a tent, let's say. In that tent, there is a corpse. Also in that tent, there is a earthenware vessel. That earthenware vessel has a lid on it that is sealed shut. I believe sealed with mud. I didn't double check, but I believe it's a proper seal. It's not just like you close it. You close it and you sealed it shut with like mud, if I remember correctly. So you're in the oil amaze, you have a corpse in there, and you also have a earthenware vessel that is closed and sealed shut. So that earthenware vessel remains tahor because earthenware vessels can only become tummy from their inside, and the inside is sealed, right? The vessel is sealed, no tumah is getting inside, and earthenware vessels do not become tummy from their outside. That's a din by klei cheres. Right? Klei cheres, mitocho. They become tummy from inside, they don't become tummy from outside. So the klei cheres remains tahor, and anything inside the klei cheres, let's say you had a fig in there, that fig, if I'm not mistaken, is the thing why I'm like nervous about all this stuff, because there's so many details when it comes to tumas oil. There's so many details. What kind of vessel, what kind of this, what kind of that, where, there's so many. So I have another 2 months of Masechta Kelim left, and then we start Masechta Oilos. I hope that after learning Masechta Oilos, the next time we have a sugya like this, I will be able to be more confident in my explanation of it. Now I'm like I have to be a little nervous because I feel like there's just so many details. I could say the wrong thing, but hopefully this is the right thing, which is that if you have a fig inside of that earthenware vessel that is sealed shut, that fig will remain tahor. Okay? So again, let's bring it all together. So you have an oil amaze. Inside the oil amaze, there is a corpse. Inside the oil amaze, there is also a earthenware vessel that is sealed shut. Inside that earthenware vessel, there's a fig. The earthenware vessel is tahor. The fig is tahor. Now, what if you have a tent? Right, so that was a scenario where we have a tent and there's a corpse in the tent, and then there's an earthenware vessel and there's a fig in the earthenware vessel. What if it was a little bit different? What if you have a tent and in the tent there's a fig? And in the tent there's also an earthenware vessel. That earthenware vessel is sealed shut. In that earthenware vessel there is a kezayis mibasar mace. In that earthenware vessel there is a kezayis of the flesh of a corpse. A kezayis mibasar mace is mitame ba'oel. In that case, we say that the tumas hames, that the mace, that the kezayis mi'hames is going to be mitame, is going to leave the vessel and be mitame the vessel, and from there be mitame the whole ohel. So we see that a klei cheres is able to protect. So when you have a tent with a corpse in it, that sealed klei cheres will protect itself and whatever is inside of it. But if you have a tent and inside the tent is a klei cheres that is sealed shut, and inside there is a kezayis mi b'sar mace, that tumah will spread, will be mitame the vessel that it's in, and also extend and be mitame the what protrude. What's the word I'm thinking of? That tumah will that tumah will spread. I don't know, that tumah will spread. Whatever the will exit, will go through, will be mitame and spread through the entire oil, and will kind of spread through the vessel and be mitame the oil. Okay, fine. Sheesh. Let's talk about tumah ritzutza for a second, because it comes up. What's tumah ritzutza? Tumah ritzutza. So I think that a common example, I think, of tumah ritzutza is, for example, I think in Eretz Yisrael there are makbid that when they bury people, that there should be a tefach of space above the corpse, above the body. Why? Because what tumah ritzutza is it's like closed tumah. Basically, if you have a body that's buried directly in the ground, so that body is mitame b'oel hames. Even once all the flesh decomposes and everything, you still have the whole skeleton, right? And if you have a whole skeleton, that's also mitame b'oel. What does that mean? It means that if somebody steps over the grave, they're making an ohel over the corpse, and they'll be mitame tumas oil. But if there is a tefach of space above the corpse, well, then that tefach of space will prevent the tumah from escape, from continuing to go up and escaping that kind of space. So when you have that tefach of space, so that would prevent the tumah from extending out and like breaking upwards and extending upwards. But without that tefach of space above the corpse, the tumah will just simply go all the way up. And what we're saying here as well is that, so you have this kezayis min hames inside of a vessel, and I think the point is that the vessel is just not big enough. There isn't that tefach of space inside the vessel, and therefore the tumah that's inside the vessel breaks through the vessel into the oil and is going to be mitami the oil. Okay, chap a shtickle tea, and we'll read it inside and bring it all together. So now, it's about 6 lines before the bottom. So ashkechon tumah belua. So we learned about tumah belua up until now. How the swallowed tumah is not mitame tara belua minalan. How do we know that if a person swallows a ring and goes into an oel hames, that even though they become tameh, the ring remains tahor? Well, kal v'chomer uma klei cheres. When it comes to klei cheres that we were just talking about, an earthenware vessel that is sealed, hamuk of tzamid posel that is sealed shut, she'eino matzil al tumah shebesocho militame. Whatever, right? If you have a kezayis mi b'sar hames inside that earthenware vessel, it's going to exit. It's going to. It's so frustrating that I don't know the right word to describe this. It's going to the tumah is going to spread out of the vessel and be metame. The tumah is going to ki'ilu break out of the vessel and be metame the oil. It will not be the vessel will be unable to contain that tumah. It's going to break out. That tumah ritzutza, as we described with the grape, when you have tumas hames and it's kind of closed in, there is no tefach of space above it, it's going to break through. So here also the kazayis b'basar hames that is in this kli cheres, even though the kli cheres is sealed, the tumas the kazayis b'basar hames that's inside of the vessel is nonetheless going to spread even outside of the vessel. It will not be contained by the vessel. And yet, but yet, in terms of can the earthenware vessel that is sealed shut protect the fig that's inside it if it's sharing a tent with a corpse? We said it can. So we have this kli cheres that if there's kazayis b'basar hames inside of it, it cannot contain that tumas hames, and it will spread beyond the kli cheres. And yet, if the kazayis b'basar hames was outside of the vessel, was in the tent, and there was a fig inside the vessel, it will protect what's inside of it. It will protect the contents of the vessel from becoming tummy. Well, if that's the case, Adam, a person, shematzil al tumah shebesochu minatame, a person who has tumah inside of him, like nevela that we were talking about, it will not escape. Maybe escape. Escape maybe is the word I'm thinking of. Escape. I think maybe that's, I don't know. Whatever. The tumah is not going to be mitame the person. So even though the kazayis b'basar hames that's inside the kli cheres will escape the kli cheres and be mitame the oil, but the nevela that's inside the person does not escape, and it's not mitame the person. So then kal v'chomer eino din shematzil atayra shebesocho militame mes militame. So certainly then a person who, when there's tumah inside of him, does not become tameh. Certainly, when there is tara inside of him, he will be able to protect that tara from becoming tameh. Right? If there's kli cheres, when there's tumas hames inside the kli cheres cannot contain the tumas hames and it escapes, and yet the kli cheres can protect what's this fig that's inside of it from becoming tameh. It will protect it, and the fig will remain tahor. So certainly, a person who, even when there's tumah inside of him, the tumah does not escape, certainly the person can protect whatever is inside of him, so that if he swallows a ring that's tahor and he walks into the oil of mace, he'll become tameh, sure, but the ring that's inside of him will remain protected, will remain tahor. Ask the Gemara, "B'malak licheres shekain ein mitame migabo." But the Gemara says, one second, but I can kind of understand why the fig that's in the kli cheres does not become tamei, remains tahor, because the kli cheres itself remains tahor. As I said earlier, if there's a tent with a corpse in it, and you have a kli cheres that's sealed and shut and sealed with mud, so the kli cheres also is tahor, because the kli cheres can only become tamei from the inside, but it's completely sealed. And it can't become tamei from the outside. So the kli cheres remains tahor, and as well, the fig as well, that's inside of it remains tahor as well. But a person that goes into an oil of mace, he does become tamei. So maybe I can argue that since the person becomes tamei, maybe what's inside of him also becomes tamei. So again, malak kli cheres shekain ein mitame migabo. A kli cheres itself remains tahor because it doesn't become tamei from the outside, and it can also protect what's inside of it. But Tomer ba'adam, will you say the same thing by a person mitame migabo, that he himself becomes tamei? Right? He walks into the kli cheres, into the oil mace, he becomes tamei. So maybe the ring that's inside of him that he swallowed also becomes tamei. Otu anon migabo kamina. But one second. Why are we focusing on external tumah? We're talking about tara blua. We're talking about swallowed tumah, internal tumah. There's enough for us to focus on that. Why are we talking about whether or not things become tumah from the outside? We're talking about mitochel coming. We're talking about inside tumah. So therefore, I'll argue adraba kleicheres chamor, that kleicheres are more stringent because shekain mitame me aviro, a kleicheres can become tame from its inside. You dangle a dead sheretz inside a kleicheres, it becomes tame. And yet that doesn't apply to a person. Person does not become tame from their inside, or certainly not if you dangle something inside of a person. So therefore, a klicheres is more chomer in that sense, and yet it does protect the fig that's inside of it. Certainly, a person that's more lenient in the sense that it does not become. What is also below negia? Right, mashenke b'adam. Right, that a klicheres is more stringent because it can become tamei from its inside even without touching, which doesn't apply to a person. So a person is more lenient in that sense, that he doesn't. Right, if you can't dangle a dead sheretz inside of him somehow to become tummy, you would have to touch him. Okay. So certainly, if it's more lenient in that respect, I can understand why the ring that he swallowed would remain tahor. Right, if a klicheres, which is more chamer, can protect the fig that's inside of it, the human that is more lenient can protect the ring that he swallowed. Fine. Says the Gemara, Ashkechon balua dilamaila, balua dilamata. Minalan. Okay, so I can understand that Tumah Belua, right? So we had to going back to the Tumah Belua, right? If a person eats nevela, so then we said that it is not going to be mitamedim, right? I mean, a person eats nevela to become tamid, but then they go to the mikvah, comes the evening, they're tahor, and the fact that there's nevela inside of them is not going to be mitamedim. So I understand balua dilmala. I understand if you ate the lamb chop with your mouth, so beseder, it's digesting and everything. Balua dilamata minalan. How do we know also if it's balua dilamata? What does that mean? Well, I don't know. You took some nevela and you put it in a pill and shoved it up your. What's a good term for a Daf Yomi shirt to describe this? You take some nevela meat, you put it in pill form, and you insert it. You basically shove it up your butt. Sorry, I think that's the Daf Yomi way to say it. So balua dilamala, balua dilamata minalan. So how do we know that if the nevela entered your body that way, it's also right rectally? So it would also not be mitame, because it's tumah blua. Kavachomer uma lemaila she'eno ose equal matzil. Well, if when it goes into your body via your mouth, where apparently I guess the digestion is not as strong as rectally, I guess. Well, I mean, I guess the idea is maybe like, once you get closer to the end of the digestion, that maybe that's where like the more serious digesting happens, I guess. Matzil. So if like when it comes into your mouth, the tumah blua is not mitame. Limata she'osa equal. So when it's further along in a further stage of the digestive system, we want to say enudin shematzil. So it will be more digested. So certainly it should not be mitame. Klum osa equal limata ela aidei maila. But 1 second, you can't just shove some food up your butt and then have it be digested. Like it needs to go through the whole system, through your mouth and then through all the intestines and everything. So I feel even so equal to lamata rav. Okay, still, I think the point is that we're saying, well, look, further along the digestive system, things are considered digestive further along, and we'll say that even if the meat got into your body that way, still it would be considered tumah belua, right? The nevela, it would be tumah blua, and it would not be matame your body. So now says the Gemara, Ashkecham balua de adam, balua de behemoth. Okay, so we've been talking about people, right? A person eats nevela, there's nevela in his body, it won't be matame. It'll initially be tamei, he goes to the mikvah, and that evening already he's tahor, even though it's still inside of him. How do we know balua de behemoth? So Tosfos gives, for example, if a dog eats meat of a corpse, and now inside the dog there is meat of the corpse, and that dog goes into a house. How do we know that that tumah that's inside the dog will not escape and be matame the house? So kavachomer, from the following kavachomer, Uma adam shemitame mechayim matzil bibalua. A person, if after all a person, people are susceptible to tumah, right? People could become tameh, and yet, in terms of tumah balua, they don't. Right? The tumah that's inside of their body is not mitame them, does not emerge. Maybe even emerge is a good word for it. To emerge, to escape. Finally, we're getting some vocabulary to use. Behema she'ena mitame mechayim. Animals don't become tummy when they're alive. When they're dead, they could be nevela. But when an animal is alive, it doesn't become tummy. So certainly if people who are susceptible to becoming tummy, but they don't become tummy when it comes to tumah blua, certainly animals that are not susceptible to tumah, when they consume tumah, for example, if a dog ate a corpse and then goes into a house, that tumah will not emerge from inside of the dog to be mitame and escape from the dog to be mitame the house. So in adin shatatzil bibalua, there would be no the tumah balua would not be mitame ba'ol. So it says the Gemara, but malu adam shekein tzarich shehiyah b'bayis hamenuga. But one second, I can understand why there's no tumah balua by a person, because by a person, after all, when it comes to bayis hamenuga, a house that has tsaras, if a person goes into it, they become tummy. But for their clothing, however, there is shehiyah. What that means is, so a person who walks into a house that has tsaras, so they immediately become tummy. Right? It's like Tumah Sa'ol, where you walk into a house that has tsaras, you immediately become tummy for having walked in the house. Your clothing that you're wearing, however, does not immediately become tummy, as we'll see in a minute. If you wait enough time to eat essentially half a loaf of bread, a few minutes, then your clothing becomes tummy. So we're saying that since by people they have this kind of, I guess, leniency, you can call it, that their clothing doesn't immediately become tummy b'bayis hamenuga. So also I can understand why they don't become tummy with tumah balua. But a animal that immediately would become, well, the animals don't become tummy, but if they had things on their backs or whatever, that they would immediately become tameh. So that's more stringent. So maybe they would also have tumah blua, and if a dog ate a corpse and went into the house, maybe there would be tumas ha'ol in the house. I can understand why there's no tumah blua by a person, because also by a bayis hamenuga, a person's clothing does not immediately become tummy. You have to wait a little bit for the clothing to become tummy. But a animal, again, animals don't become tummy when they're alive, but if there were things on the back of the animal, on its back, and it walked into bayis hamenuga, those things would immediately become tummy. And maybe they would also be mitami b'balua. One second. The Gemara says, wait. That is a faulty comparison, because actually, as we're going to prove, animals and people are actually the same in this regard. Because animals don't wear clothing. People wear clothing. Animals don't wear clothing. Maybe an animal was carrying something on its back. Well, guess what? If a person was carrying something on his back that wasn't clothing, it would also become tummy right away. L'kelev she'al gaba. When we're talking about an animal, what would become tummy in a bayis hamenuga if there were things on the animal's back? Well, guess what? Adam nami lo bai. Also, by people, if they had things on their back that they weren't wearing, those things would also immediately become tummy. It's not that we learn in a Mishnah Masechta Negoyim. Hanichnas l'bayis hamenuga, a person who goes into a house that has tsaras, v'chelev al kseifav, he's not wearing his clothing, they're on his shoulders. V'sandalav v'tabosa biyadav, and he's holding his shoes, and he's holding his rings. He's not wearing these things. So hu ve'ein tmei meyad, he and they become tamei immediately. If he was wearing his clothing, v'sandalav b'raglav, and he was wearing his shoes, v'tabosa b'etzbo, and he was wearing his rings, Hu tamei miyad, so he immediately becomes tamei. Ve'ein taorin ad sheyashav b'chtei achilas pras, and they remain tahor until he's inside the bayis hamenuga for enough time to be able to eat achilas pras, which is half a loaf of bread. Paschitim, we're talking about a wheat loaf, v'lo pasarim, not a barley loaf. Meisa v'ochel b'lifton, while he's leaning and eating it with relish, with hummus or whatever. That's just a way of describing how long this takes, but the amount of time that it takes to eat half a loaf, about a few minutes. So we see that, meaning, so what just happened? We said that, what about Tumah Blua by an animal? So we say, well, if by people people can become tummy, but there's no Tumah Blua by them, so animals when they're alive don't become tummy, so certainly there should be no Tumah Blua. We want to say, yeah, but people, they have this leniency by their clothing, by Bayis HaMenuga, but that's only if they're wearing their clothing, right? If they're carrying their clothing, like an animal would be, you put something on its back, it has the same, it's the identical halacha, so there's really no question to be asked from there. Friends, we're going to hold it here. Sheesh. Wow, I actually forgot to record it. I had to press record on my phone but I think this was a really long daf. When did I start? I think I started recording about an hour and 20 minutes ago, maybe even more. Wow, Chevra, so that turned out to be a bit of a tricky daf. The first part we learned about learning out different things about different animals. I don't really know what to say. It would be tricky just to get back into that. The animal including behemoths including chayes including behemoths, tamei, tahora, but we learn out different things from each one. I'm not going to get into those details right now. And then the second part of the daf, we got the new Mishnah, and we learned about swallowed tumah, which is very interesting. That swallowed tumah is not going to make people tamei, or if a animal swallows, eats a corpse and then goes into the house, it's not going to be tamei the house. And also, if you swallow something and then go into a olam mace, that thing that you swallowed does not become tamei either. Wow, very difficult topic, but very interesting, I think, as well. Chevra, have a great day, a great Shabbos. Cheers.